we're going to talk about Angular plus Scully equals Jamstack. We're going to talk about Jamstack and Angular today. It's something that hasn't been possible for a long time, but as of several months ago, Angular developers could also do Jamstack apps as well, and we're going to talk about it. So what is the Jamstack? A lot of us, if I said, hey, turn to the person next to you and explain what it is, many of us couldn't explain what the Jamstack is, and I think that's a huge problem because the benefits of it are massive, and if we don't know exactly what it is, then it's hard to understand why we need to embrace it. So let me get into one of the benefits is it's trying to pre-render, like just kind of like a short version. It wants to pre-render and cache all the views in your app. It wants to cache as many of your API calls as it possibly can. And then the real big importance is do not serve any of those things that we already said from your own server. Get it out on a CDN because that is how you get the most performance out of your app. So that's like a short way of describing what the Jamstack is. And I'm going to say this. No amount of optimization that you can put in your front-end app can provide as much increase in performance for your end users as the Jamstack will. And that's just having not understood what the Jamstack was to understanding it and then implementing it in production. I can tell you there's no amount of 4, 5, 6 months you could do to optimize your front-end code that will provide as much optimization or perceived performance improvement for your end users as will converting your app into a Jamstack app. So now that we've kind of talked about what Jamstack is, let's talk about what Scully is. So Scully is how you add Jamstack to your Angular apps. It's a static site generator, or it's a Jamstack tool chain is another way to consider it. So the goals of Scully are to provide all of the Jamstack goals, but to do it for 100% of Angular projects, okay? And another goal is to require little to no effort to integrate it. Like you don't have to modify your Angular code because it's just Angular and Scully kind of sits on the outside. So you don't need to modify your whole app to integrate with Scully. Your whole app can just exist and Scully can kind of wrap it up. Another goal is to support markdown so people could do blogs and documentation. And then to have a really healthy plugin and ecosystem, plugin system and plugin ecosystem so that people can author and assist Scully, but as well use other plugins that people have authored to assist Scully as well. So that's the goal of the Scully project. And I want to just kind of have this side by side right here. So this is the same site in production, 1-800-Contacts. We worked, the Scully team worked with 1-800-Contacts. And on the right, we have the app. It's going to start over here in a second. When it goes to white, that's when it's starting over. So on the right, we have the app running with Scully. And on the left, we have the app running without Scully. And so you can see that to get that first meaningful paint is about an 8-second difference between Scully and the same exact code base without Scully. In fact, these are both running in production. I just turned the cookie that says, hey, you get the Scully experience or not Scully. I just flipped that. And so it's about an 8 to 8.5 second difference if you're on fast 3G. So for most mobile users, this is what they'll be experiencing. And so as soon as you tell it to load, it loads almost immediately with Scully turned on. Okay, and the whole site loads. All these buttons that you see, the sign-in button, any of these, these vendor labels, the provider names, most of these call to actions are all clickable and they all work and you can interact with them. And so you get that kind of interaction. Users could scroll down on the page and all that kind of interaction is ready significantly faster with Scully than it would be just with Angular. And to get this performance increase, it actually required almost no code changes for this client, okay, for this user, for the 1-800-Contacts team. So this was a massive, massive increase for them. And it dramatically increased the conversion of their users. So they saw massive conversion spikes after implementing Scully, and it required almost no effort from them. So it's been a fantastic win for them. So I kind of want to go in and we're going to do a demo. We're going to add Scully to an existing Angular project. And I'm going to kind of say, hey, here's how you add it. And we're going to go through the config file. Then we'll pre-render an app with it. And then we'll kind of poke around, like look at it. And then we'll add a plugin and we'll cache some API calls. So we've got about 15 minutes to do all that, so I'm just gonna kind of head over there. So this is an Angular project. It's very simple. If we come over here and we look at it, it's just this donut store. So it's an Angular plus Scully donut store, and the homepage has a list of donuts. And if I click on one, it takes me to the detail page where I can get some nutritional facts about them, and I can go back to see all the donuts. Besides those, so each of these donuts has its own ID. If you look up here in the URL, each one has its own ID. And so if you sit back and you look at these routes, there's only one other route, which is the about route. Okay, so we go to about, just kind of talk about, hey, why did we do the donut store? It's Angular. It needed to have some routes with some params, which is that donut ID. And because it's making calls to an API, we can cache those, and then we can also add blog support. So this is why we did this donut app. Anyway, so we're going to add Scully to this app so that we can kind of see it pre-rendered. And one last thing before we kind of go into the code, I want to show you something. If I go into this command panel inside the DevTools, and if I disable JavaScript, right now, you guys will all realize if I refresh this, I should be dead. Like, yeah, the app doesn't run. Without JavaScript, Angular apps, don't really work. So I'm going to re-enable JavaScript so that we can get this app running. Okay, so here's our app is back. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to add Scully to this project. So let's come back to the code base, and to add Scully, we're actually to add it. You just say ng add Scully io-init. And that takes care of downloading the Scully files, and then also it runs a schematic, which helps set up your project for use with Scully. It makes only a few file modifications, and it does it for you, so there's not a lot for you to do. And when you're done, it spits out this Scully config. And in our Scully config, there's not a lot. It's telling us, hey, our main project is called Donut Store. It lives in the source folder, and when you build it, I want you to put it into the Donut Store static dist/Donut Store static directory. That's all that this is telling us, okay? And I already did a build, so let me go ahead and delete this. I didn't want to install it online just because you never know what's going to happen on presentations, right? Okay, so so it's already been installed, and since I've installed it, that's all I really need to do to kind of pre-render the app for the first time. So at this point, I can say npm run Scully, and then I'm also going to serve it afterwards, npm run Scully serve. And this will go ahead and it will build it, and then it's going to serve those static files on a local server, a lot like ngserve does, okay? So it's serving the ng build output, and it's also serving the Scully output right here. But I want to scroll up and kind of show you what happened in this Scully build. So it's telling us, hey, this is kind of where it started. Hey, I'm gonna go ahead and import your Angular build. I did a build before I started this presentation too. It's just an ng build. I didn't do production mode. I just did ng build. It says, hey, I'm going to import that build output, and then I'm going to start the Scully servers. And then it says, hey, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to discover all your routes, right? And as it went through and it discovered all my routes, it said, hey, I found this route, and I don't know what to do with it. I don't know what the donut IDs are that go in that spot. So in a second, we'll go through and we'll solve for that. I'll show you how to add a plugin so that it can get those donut IDs, right? And then it went ahead and it found, it said, hey, I found your about route, and I rendered it to the about index.html. And I found your home route, and I rendered it to the index.html. And if we come up here and we look in that donut static, if we go to about, this is our about route. And if we look for that app root, we have our app root, but normally the app root is empty. But this app is very much not empty. It's actually got quite a bit of stuff in here, including you can see those pre-rendered bullet points that I wrote in Angular kind of templated out here. So this is a static HTML file that is pre-rendered using Scully, but it was rendered with Angular, all right? And when I serve this, what's going to happen is you're going to immediately see this pre-rendered HTML, okay? But then at the very bottom, we have all of our same Angular files, and they're going to download, and then the Angular app is going to turn on top of this. So it's going to be a static page for a second, and then the JavaScript will load on top of it. So at that point, it will just be your Angular app from then on out. So let's go ahead and serve this up and check it out. So if I go to the bottom, I can click on this this localhost. So this, if you look at this, this looks a lot like this ngserve. In fact, if I open up the dev tools, they'll look like the exact same app. Okay, so they look identical. I can scroll down on it. If I click on one of these, it'll go to the details page. I can get the nutritional facts. It opens those up. This is very much just like our Angular app. But if I open up that command panel with DevTools and I say disable JavaScript, and now I do a refresh, this app still rendered. Okay, so here I'll do that refresh again. So this app, this is a fully functioning app. If I click on one of these details, it's dead because it didn't pre-render that details page. But this page pre-rendered, and it also said it found our about page. It also pre-rendered. So both of those work, and both of those work with JavaScript disabled. Okay. So now if I come back over here and I re-enable JavaScript, and we come back, we'll see that if I click on this, it's now just my Angular app. Okay. So it was initially extremely fast because it downloaded, all I had to download was that HTML to run. And then it downloaded the JavaScript in the background, and the app still ran. Okay, so just to kind of drive home the point, on this local host, if I turn it on to slow 3G and do a refresh, it's going to take, I don't know, 10, maybe 15 seconds to load my local host version of the app, right? In fact, I'm just going to kind of walk away because it's been so slow. And on this Scully version, if I do the exact same thing and I say, hey, go ahead and do slow 3G, and we do, let's go back to the home page, and we do a full refresh. So when it went to localhost, it actually came back with a fully pre-rendered HTML page. You can kind of see that. So the page appeared immediately. I didn't have that big white canvas for forever. And the images started to load. And if I come back out of here, eventually the JavaScript all loaded as well, and this will turn into an Angular app. Okay, but I just want to point out, like, this one renders. If I do a refresh, it renders immediately, like it shows up like instantaneously. Whereas this one, it's still actually not loaded, right? So like, this is a pretty poor experience. So I'm just kind of trying to drive home the point of how fast Scully can be for your users. So let's go ahead and refresh, turn this back on to online, and we'll do a refresh. All right, so I'm doing okay on time. I have got like 7 more minutes. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to pre-render this this details page because it didn't know how to do that. If we come back to the build, remember it said, hey, I'm going to skip this route because I don't know how to solve for those donut IDs. So this is a plugin system, okay? And if you've heard of plugins before, they're very simple to write. And in fact, Scully comes with some already built in, okay? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to add a configuration for this donut ID route. So we're just going to copy that route, okay? Then we'll say, hey, for that route, we want to use the JSON plugin, okay? So we'll say JSON. So we're just going to go get some JSON from an API. And then I'm going to say, hey, use the URL of http local.donuts.api 3000, okay? And then for the donut ID, because I have to use the same key that's up here. I'll say for the donut ID, I want you to use I want you to take out the property from each of the things you get back from that JSON. I want you to take out the property ID. Okay. At this point, we're going to rerun our build. This time, it's going to render quite a few more pages. Hold on. It died for me. Let's go up and see what it said. Cannot fetch data for route. Donuts, donut ID. Is it donut API? Oh, I spelled donuts wrong. Actually, go see where it's getting this from. Sorry, I forgot the name of my API. Local.donuts. Yeah, sorry, I spelled donuts wrong. Okay. So let's go back to our code. I fixed that. Let's rerun again. Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm using the wrong API. Donuts. Yeah, okay, so we're going to use the donuts API. Now let's run it again. I apologize for having these bumps in my presentation. Okay. I'm going to add a flag. Scan routes. Why are you not working? Sorry, I'm going to make sure that it sees this API. Okay, so it has the API. Give me 1 second. I'm going to, I've got this config. Oh yeah, sorry. I gotta put this in here somewhere. Sorry guys. Sorry everybody. I put that in the wrong spot. Okay, now let's run it. All right, so now it's going to render a lot more than just the home page. It's actually taking some time to re-render every donut details page for the entire app. So now, if we come over to our donut static directory, we have this donuts folder, and there's quite a few. Let's go ahead and delete that one. That was just a result. So we have all these donuts that were from the home page, and if we look at them, they're all pre-rendered. If we scroll to the bottom, you can see, yep, there's quite a bit of information in here about the donut itself, including its title. So we've pre-rendered everything. So now let's go ahead and serve it. So if we say npm run Scully serve, this will go ahead and serve our static files again. So we can click on there. So now we're on our, we're back on our static app, and we can disable JavaScript. And now the whole site will work without JavaScript enabled. Okay, users can click pretty much everywhere. Everything will work. No JavaScript enabled. Or they can just leave it enabled, and it can just be an Angular app. Okay, so we can have pieces of the page that are dynamic running with Angular, as well as a lot of pieces that are static that were pre-rendered with Scully. So let's go ahead and enable JavaScript again, just so we don't get any weird results. All right, I'm going to go and refresh this. One thing I want to do, though, if we come back to this home page, if you notice, I'm calling my donuts API, and I'm calling it from an API. I would like to cache that, and as one of the speed and performances that comes with Scully, I want to cache some API calls. So I'm going to show everybody how simple it can be to use Scully to cache API calls. The call to get these donuts, I don't want to make that in production. I want to make that call for these donuts at build time, and then I want to deploy that donut API call with my app. So let's go ahead and implement that in our code. Okay. So if I open up the donut.component, okay, and you can see here we've got a couple things already in our constructor. We're going to add one more thing in constructor. So we're going to say private transfer state, and this is going to be the transfer state service from Scully. Okay, so we brought in the transfer state service, and right now we're getting the donuts by taking the params, getting the donut ID out of the param, and then doing an HTTP call. So we're going to change this slightly. We're going to say, hey, this transfer state.use Scully transfer state. We're going to say we want you to store the donuts. We're going to call that. We're going to cache this into a static cache. We're going to use the key donuts. And we're going to say, hey, if the donuts were in the cache, then make this call. Okay. So now we've got our donuts kind of described differently. We're using the Scully transfer state. So now I'm going to do an ng build. Okay. Oh, I already am doing a build. Perfect. My build watched. So now I can just redo a Scully build. Sorry. Let's do a build and serve. Okay, so now we're going to tell Scully to regenerate the website with that call cached. All right. And it's going to cache that call when it generates the index HTML, the homepage. And now when we serve this over here, if I do a refresh, it didn't cache the call. Why not? Did I not save this file? Let's do build watch again. All right, I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And I'm going to now rerun this to Scully. Give this a second. Go ahead. Okay, we're built. Let's go over here. Check it out. Refresh. We'll look for the API calls. Still making the API call. All right. I don't know why it's making the API call. It's not supposed to. So I wish I was out of time. So I'm out of time. So I wish I could debug this. But using this, I think I just have some build configuration going on my machine that's kind of messed up. But caching your data is as simple as this. It's as simple as making these calls to get the data out of there. So, oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong component. Okay, sorry. If we come over here, what I did was I cached this page's call. So this page right here is cached. So if I refresh this page, you'll notice it has the data, but it didn't actually go to the API. So I'm sorry, that was my bug. I just implemented it on the wrong component. So this page now makes no calls in production. The data is cached. If I go back to all the donuts, it makes the call to the donut API. But if I go to this one, it also didn't make a call to the API to get that data because it cached that call as well. So it cached all my data. So now my server doesn't have to be accessible to the users in production as either, at least for these calls, because they're all cached as part of the pre-rendering build. So yeah. So there's a lot more to know about Scully. And if you head over to the docs, scully.io, there's some tutorials on there. There's also a lot of information about the APIs and the different configurations and how to build plugins. And there's a lot more information over there for if you want to get in touch with the Scully team. You can learn about our weekly office hours and you can join those. You can also reach out to me on Twitter/Aaron Frost, and then my slides are up on m.hero.dev/VikingsJamstack if you want to check out these slides. So yeah, thanks.